The next conversation we have to have, because a couple of you asked for it, was a conversation about SROs. And so first, let's have a conversation about the counselors. The counselor total, if you were to return them all, would be, I need your help, guys, 93, 186, and 372.
$651,163.
Okay, that's counselors. SROs is another 650.
650,000. We might have some opportunity of savings within that 650. That's one of our projects that we're working on.
So Amy and I met with the mayor and the city manager today because we anticipated you wanting to have this conversation. And we think that we might be able to shift the contracts, just cut out the city of Vista as the middleman and potentially have some savings. It's not going to be a lot, I would imagine, maybe 50 grand or something.
Possibly, and then we have the other city contract that we have not met with yet.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's an
Oceanside.
option to use
Oceanside.
off-duty officers.
Yeah.
That's what other districts have done to save when they couldn't afford to do the SROs. They used off-duty officers.
Yeah. So let's come back to the SROs, because I don't want to convolute the conversation. Let's have a conversation about the counselors, and then we can move and talk about, because there's a couple more specifics we should talk about with regard to the SROs. Let's do the counselors first. We know that we're $1 million in the positive.
Bring all the counselors back.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I say we bring all the counselors back.
When we did this last week, and I was really the one who spoke about the SROs.
Yes.
And so just for perspective, in 1990, I started as a high school assistant principal, work
Right.
with the school. It stands for school resource officer. The intention of this was not to have a cop on campus. It was to have a liaison so that we could begin to connect high school kids with the police, so that we could have some better experiences, and that they wouldn't look at policemen as simply somebody who was going to arrest them and get them in trouble. Candidly, it never evolved into that. The unfortunate part about that is police officers are not educators. They don't see themselves in that role, and they see themselves as enforcement people. The problem with the SRO is that we now have a tremendous prison school-to-prison
Yes.
pipeline in our school systems, and candidly, when we look at the number of kids who get involved with their SROs on our campuses, nobody's going to like this, but it's all our black and brown kids.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see much of that. Here's the other problem, that people want the safety issue of this, and one of the speakers tonight mentioned a soft target. Well, Saugus High School had an SRO.
Right.
It didn't change. It doesn't change the idea that, we're going to go to school because we know there's no one there. That's not true.
So when you say Saugus High School, you're talking about the
Today
shooting that was
in Santa
Yeah.
Clarita.
I just wanted the audience to understand
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
referring
okay.
to.
And so the problem is, our issue with school shootings is not that we could put enough policemen on campus that would stop school shootings.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the unfortunate part about that. And so as we look at what we could do, I would be the first one to tell you, and I mentioned it to a couple of the ladies in the break, my wife's been a counselor for 30 years. I think we're better off with counselors and individuals who can begin to intervene way earlier than a youngster decides to, how in the world does a 15-year-old today get a gun and come to school?
Proactive.
Before that, we reach that point, and that's really the prevention part of this that would have to happen. So I might be the only one on from the standpoint of the board, but I just am not supportive of the SROs in that regard, because I don't think it provides what people think it provides. It's a police officer on campus, but there was a police officer at Marjorie Stone in Florida, in Parkland, and he didn't prevent anything. So I mean, again, that's why I'm just not supportive of that. But I understand the board, but I would certainly be supportive of us if we can maintain the counselors. That's for sure.
So we have two right now.
Debbie, did
for
you make a
counselors.
motion?
Okay, yeah, I know you wanted to say something, Martha. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I would concur with what Trustee Morton said, to bring the counselors back. Prevention is where we need to go with this, not reactive.
Okay. So we're going to restore, what's on the table right now is restoring high school, middle school, and elementary school counselors. So the red would be removed from all three, and we would put that back in, and that's 650. What was the number again, so we get it right?
651163.
Correct. Is there, we have consensus. We have 4. Did you want to say something, Cipriano?
I was just going to make it a package, so instate the counselors and remove the SROs, and
Okay.
that'll be something to consider in the future.
Okay.
But part of that conversation is as we look at the budget as it rolls out for the spring,
We might have funding
looking
available.
at what we talked about in Tier 1, Tier 2, obviously, if we restore back the counselors, then it looks like that's what's going to happen after this conversation. But looking at some of the other items that are high priority
Yes.
in Area 1 or Tier 1, Tier 2.
And we can do that. Now that we have the tiers, we can bring it back to you when we have access to additional funding.
You know,
So,
we didn't have anyone come and speak about the liaisons we cut, and
No.
since I've been on the board, all we've talked about is the wonderful work those folks do. So I would be for bringing those people back
Next.
before we.
We hear you. We hear you.
I think everybody knows that I value our counselors, and I would have several at each of the schools if we could. That said, I saw what happened today at Santa Clarita. And I understand the SROs won't be in there maybe to stop it because it happens quickly, but they are a deterrent. And I think we have to think, like, this is under our watch. So if it's under my watch and there's a danger for somebody going on that they would deter, I have to say they're important enough for us to keep.
Okay. Ms. Morton?
And I agree with Mrs. Smithfield. Just the presence of a sheriff's car on the campus where my daughter attends makes me feel so much better to know that there's someone there if there is something that happens that would, I just feel safer sending my child to school where I know there's an SRO or a
Understand.
sheriff or someone.
I understand. So the way it's sitting right now, we have 3 against and 2 for. We can bring it back, as I mentioned before. This is not too late for us to have ongoing conversations, but that's where we're sitting right now. Is there any adjustment to that? We're talking about SROs. I think the counselors we're good on. That was my impression so far. That's why I'm asking for clarification.
Well, I just, I think it's a matter of who you ask about the SROs. So it wasn't necessarily something that I would have said, let's cut the SROs, right? Because the funding was there and such. But the more research that it's done, we know that marginalized students, poor kids, LGBTQ kids, they're at the risk for physical violence with police on campus. Those are the statistics. And as Trustee Alderson said, the one at Parkland ran away from the situation. So I think it just depends who you ask. I had correspondence from family members who in the community who they shudder at the police presence. So there are always two sides, but it doesn't deter someone who's sick, mentally ill, from coming on campus and.
I'm talking about the everyday life on a high school campus especially. So I know when my kids were at Vista High, we were year-round, and on my off-track, I spend a lot of time on that campus, and there are things happening every day, not about somebody coming in and shooting it up, but other dangerous things that I just believe it would deter.
I think Rich wanted to say something.
Well, again, I worked with a lot of SROs, and there's no, I have to be candid, I mean, I never saw a deterrent once. I mean, and the other thing is, one of the things happened, when one of the speakers mentioned it tonight, they're gonna call the SRO because 2 kids get in an argument. I mean, we've escalated to a level here in which everything that happens at a high school especially is going to become a police issue. And candidly, we have administrators who've been trained, and that's what they're there for, to deal with that kind of thing. So, I mean, I know people want to say it's a deterrent, but we have to look at the, you know, if the maximum level of violence isn't deterred, what other things are going to be deterred?
So to say that nobody's been deterred, you don't know that. You don't know that. So none of us here can say that statement.
Well, unfortunately, Rosemary, I can't say that. I was a high
No,
school
Rich,
principal
you
for a
don't
long
know
time.
people that came and were deterred from doing something because they didn't report to you saying, I was deterred, because there was this person there.
Do we need to extend this meeting till tomorrow or till November 15th?
We're literally in tomorrow right now, or almost.
Per the Brown Act, do we need to post a new agenda because it's a new day?
We actually may have to do that.
Yep.
I think what I would recommend we do is let's revisit this particular topic. As I mentioned before, it's not too late. We can have a conversation with this. We've accomplished our task for the first interim, and we can come back to this topic and just let it sit the way it currently is. I know it's an emotional topic.
The
The topic of the SRO. There has already been consensus on restoring all of the counselors. And right now, for our purposes, we've accomplished our task, and we will come back to this topic. I know it's an emotional topic, and I'm sensitive to that, but it really is the next day, so it's 12:01. So technically, we've got a Brown Act issue going on.
And then we do have one last item, the calendar meeting dates for.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, members
Thank
of
you.
the audience.
This meeting is adjourned.